Alrighty, so this is a overview of my Capstone project, the all too entertainingly named Quest of Shadows. So at the main menu at the top we have the option to load a JSON file as an engine theme. I've only made one thus far, the aptly named Shadows file. Then jumping down to 5, there's the quick play option, which jumps right into the action, quickly running through all the steps 1 through 4 that we'll walk through momentarily. Next, at 6, the all too important credits for yours truly. At 7, a debug mode, as this project got complex quickly, and there was a lot of math deserialization issues, and so on. And finally, the ability to quit the game cleanly. For this demo, I'll go ahead and turn on the debug mode so you can see what's going on in the background. Then we'll go ahead and load up the Shadows file so we can get this stuff rolling. Once that's loaded, we can generate a dungeon, and the layout actually builds a whole bunch of things in the background, chaining together a bunch of linked locations, constructing monsters, building items, and constructing descriptions, so on and so forth. The layout uses a doubly linked list to initially create the chain, and then goes back and randomly assigns another set of double links to individual locations to create a kind of a complex web. These IDs are hidden from the player and rewritten when they're displayed in the travel so that the player doesn't really know which direction they're headed or which way is technically out. At this point, we can generate the player. For the most part, this is a set of randomly generated statistics within a narrow band. This gives you the ability to have a reasonable player, but with some variations so that it doesn't get too stale. With all the setup out of the way, then we can just go ahead and hit 4 and play the game. Oh, and as I mentioned before, the quick play option runs through all of this in one fell swoop, so you won't have to step through all this individually. So now that we're in the dungeon, let's go ahead and give ourselves some equipment so they're not wandering around empty-handed. Let's see, a dagger, chain shirt, an astral compass, and an elixir of cat's eye. Not too bad. Now, just because we have these doesn't mean that we've equipped them, so there's an inventory system to put them on and get the bonuses that, they have on them. So as you can see here, the dagger, the chain shirt, and the astral compass each have their own bonuses that they attach to the player, and the player status reflects those bonuses in the player statistics. So then we'll go ahead and use the elixir of cat's eye and check the player stats. Unfortunately, there's something going on with the consumables. I think the durations aren't quite working, so those come up as no duration, no effects. Still working on that part. Anyway, moving along. Each time you do a look around the room, you actually check the player's perception score. So now that we have some better equipment, the player's perception goes up and the amount of things that your character notices about the room improves. So you get longer descriptions, you notice whether or not the combat chance is improved, and you notice more things about the room. So you get more statistics about the room as you go along. So let's go ahead and travel to another room. Let's go travel to the Dread Panopticon. That sounds fun. And as we take a look around the room, there's always the possibility of getting attacked by something. And so as we jump in here, a skeleton meets us. And so when combat starts, there's always a perception check. And so if you win the check, you get to attack first. But if you lose the check, you are ambushed by that monster. And so this jumps into some pretty basic turn-based combat, where the player gets to roll a bunch of dice, essentially, and there's some attack checks based on their equipment. Once we finally defeat the skeleton, there's actually the option of getting some treasure at the end, depending on whether or not there's a treasure chance and the character's perception score, and actually their sanity, whether or not they're cogent enough to actually find anything, which I thought was entertaining. Looking around the room again, you can actually find further links. Just looking around the room the first time doesn't necessarily mean that you'll find every exit, so it's always worth taking another look. This does, however, mean that every time you look, you might get attacked by another monster. Well, let's take a trip over to the torchlit garden. Our nemesis, the skeleton, has returned. This time, let's see if we can get away from him. We'll see if we can flee and whether or not he catches up with us. When attempting to flee, if you fail, the monster actually gets a free attack at your back, so it's kind of a risk-rewards. However, once we succeed, we're free and clear. Having had enough of the Torchlit Garden, let's go ahead and check out the Desolate Crypt. Seems like the skeleton has followed us here as well. Well, let's see if we can do some damage to the skeleton. He's putting up a good fight. Oh, finally. Some treasure. Let's see. Codex of Shifting Shadows, Orb of the Twilight Veil, and a spear. Good stuff. Definitely upgrade to the spear, and that Codex of Shifting Shadows is really nice. Well, let's take a look around. Ah, and a kobold, who is no match for our new spear. Oh, yeah, and I disabled debug mode once you're in the game. Looking around a bit. Off to the Frozen Barracks. Another skeleton. However, you can see that now we've upgraded our equipment enough that this skeleton is no match for us. His attack chance is -2. Yeah, one hit, whack. We get a potion of minor healing, but as I said before, potions aren't, and consumables aren't working. And so that about wraps it up. Largely, you could go through and do the quit functions and the credits and so on and so forth, but those are largely just menu-based, print statements and so on and so forth. There's a lot more that I'd like to do with this program, have some fun with the games aspect, more inventory management, clean up the bugs, but for the most part, that covers the major functions that I'd like to have done for this particular Capstone project. Thank you so much for encouraging me to do this. I learned a lot. Hope you enjoyed the demonstration, and I look forward to seeing you around for the next programming class. Thank you.